I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
All right, welcome back everyone to another edition of the Dungeon Master Q&A. I am the Dungeon Master, but joining me today is a special guest, Bad Data. Bad Data is not only a player in my campaign, but is a Dungeon Master himself. Say hello to everyone, Bad Data.
Hello, everyone.
So today we're going to be taking a question from the forum. A member asks if a light cantrip was casted on the eyes as a point of origin, would the character be blinded? Um, Now, I think it's only fair as the guest to let you speak first. I have some thoughts on this and, would like to, cover it from both a raw and RAI rules as intended perspective, and go over rule of cool and all that as well. But first, let's just get your thoughts on it and then kind of go from there.
So, first off, there is to clarify the three different points of consideration. One is if unprompted and with no initial setup, you cast lights on the eyes of a willing creature. The obvious answer is that creature should definitely be blinded, barring some exceptional corner cases. Um, Secondly, if you attempt to do this to an enemy under normal circumstances, since that's not something the light spell is meant to do, this should ordinarily automatically fail. Only being possible as a text effect against a helpless or unconscious or otherwise unable to defend themselves target. In which case, it's weird, but not outside the scopes of things you couldn't do by any other means, by say just tying a blindfold around their head or cutting their eyes out with a spoon or something. Um,
But why a
so
spoon, cousin?
spoon
Sorry,
seems
I,
like the
I I couldn't help throwing in a little Robin Hood Prince of Thieves reference there.
yeah. Um, Yeah, those are obviously the basic opening thoughts. I have more ideas as to how to address the idea from multiple angles, but
All
that's the
right,
first.
yeah, well let's get into that after I kind of bounce off of some of what you just said there. So first let's go ahead and address that rules as written issue, since that's going to be the first and foremost answer that most people are going to be looking for is what are the rules for the light cantrip. And this member does not specify which edition they're talking about, but we have to assume that it's fifth edition. So we'll go with that first.
Hold on. Citation needed. Why do we have to assume it's fifth edition?
Because no matter what anyone's personal feelings are on any edition, it is a known fact that 5th edition has brought in more players than have ever played Dungeons and Dragons. Therefore, it is, without question, the lion's share of the Dungeons and Dragons market.
Hmm. Okay, fair enough. I just found that wording galling.
Eh, and no matter what your or my or anyone's personal opinion on any of the editions is, we have to give credit to 5th edition for bringing in so many new players, regardless of anything else.
Hmm.
Anyway, 5th edition's rules here clearly state that you touch one object that is no larger than 10 feet in any dimension, and until the spell ends, the object sheds bright light in a 20-foot radius and dim light for an additional 20 feet. The light can be colored as you like, blah, blah, blah. However, if you target an object held or worn by a hostile creature, that creature must succeed on a dexterity saving throw to avoid the spell. Nowhere in there does it mention anything about a hostile creature other than objects that they're holding? So if, for instance, you wanted to cast light on the shadow creature's armor, thereby forcing it to take damage or negate its regeneration or whatever, because it's wearing the light, you could force it to make a dexterity save, but you could not use its eyes as a point of origin, and even a willing creature, yourself included, it doesn't mention anything about anything other than an object. So it would appear as though the rules as written intend for you, the rules as intend for you to only target an object, because the rules as written only mention objects. Thoughts on that?
I think that gets into the very flexible nature of what is considered an object in most systems. Because here's the thing, you can basically refine that argument down to the point where the distinction in some cases, one where the actual stats of the thing in question art reference is kind of meaningless. Because maybe you could make the argument you can't cast it on the eyes because they're an object. Well, let's consider some corner cases. What if, for instance, your eyes were implanted? They're definitely objects if they were, say, an Urzat's eye or a marksman's eye or something like that.
Okay, but let's be realistic here. You're talking about something that is clearly an object.
Yes.
A glass eye is clearly an object. An eye patch is clearly an object. But if you had a surgically transplanted pig's eye, I would not say that that is an object.
I see. I see. That is interesting. And I guess that is a bit of a distinction. Though I do put out there that that is interesting. Uh, what I'm talking about is like, how do I say this? Like mechanical distinction. If one person has a magical eye implanted and one person has an organic eye implanted, in a rules context, how much is there really separating that prevents light from being casted on one and not the other?
I would say the wording of the word object. I would say that if you're Jamie Lannister and you have a golden hand, that the hand is a legit target for the light cantrip, per the 5th edition rules, as an object that is carried or worn, held
Hmm.
or worn. And so the same would go for an eye patch or any kind of other, non-organic eye. I think that's really what it comes down to, is non-organic, and an object is not something that is alive. That is a creature. That is, some kind of animal, or, something else like that. An object is like a rock. I would even argue,
Right.
I would even argue that, perhaps even a plant would not count as an object, but now we're getting into some real, like,
The thing is,
semantics arguments.
it's corner cases, corner cases, corner cases, because there are literally exceptions to every single thing you just said. But let's
Exactly.
let's move past that and clarify. In context, we have established there is a context under which light can be cast under eye as a point of origin. It's just a corner case. But let's explore that corner case.
Yeah, so let's say you have a glass eye. Well, you're already blind in that eye to begin with.
Yeah.
So I would say that it has no mechanical effect.
But what if you can see through your
Now you're
mechanical eye?
now you're talking about what is clearly some kind of magical eye.
Yeah.
Well, it's magic. So that comes down to DM ad hoc how do you see the magic versus how you see the light cantrip? Do you see the magic of because some kind of magical eye probably gives you know true vision or dark vision or see invisibility or some kind of special vision.
Yeah.
And so it comes down to you as a DM. Do you see that as a benefit or a hindrance to resisting any kind of negative effects from having the light cantrip cast upon it?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's so powerful of an artifact, like the Eye of Vecna, that like, or the Eye of Groomsh, that like you can't even cast it on it. The object itself is so powerful that it resists it. Or maybe it just enhances it, or who knows. That's something that as a DM you're going to have to ad hoc, because it is such a cornerstone case. There's never going to be an official ruling on that.
Yeah. So I feel like we've covered the general idea of the main answer to this question is non-applicable.
Non
But
applicable, right?
let's get around to some rule of cool examinations. Both the idea of using this as an attack form and using it as something you'd like to use on yourself.
Yeah,
Because
well,
I feel like there are some workarounds.
I think we'll save that for just after we cover one more thing, which is he could, or I shouldn't say he, they, the member, could be talking about Pathfinder or 3.5. So let's just real quick take a look at the rulings for that edition's light cantrip, just to see if there's any difference.
There isn't. I double checked. It has the
No,
same object wording.
I know that there isn't, but aside from the 10 minutes a level being changed to an hour, it's the exact same wording about an object touched, and it doesn't have specific wording in the spell about objects worn or carried by a hostile creature, but that's because it's covered in the general combat rules of 3.5 and Pathfinder when you're trying to target an enemy's objects anyway. So, um, you know, like Bad Data just said, exact same ruling on 3.5. So we're not going to find any discrepancy when it comes to rules as written. And I believe that I am correct in the rules as intended, that if it was intended to affect anything other than some kind of non organic object, that it would say something about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And typically there would be some kind of saving throw then as well for a spell like this. There's a saving throw for cure wounds because it can harm somebody in 3.5. So for there to not be a saving throw for light kind of shows you that it's meant to only affect objects.
Yes.
All right.
Indeed.
So now let's get to the fun part,
Yes.
because this is where as a dungeon master we get to flex our creative muscles and talk about hypothetical cases of okay, well, would you let's start with this. Would you allow a character to target the eyes of a hostile creature with a spell like light? Would you allow them to target an ally with a spell like light? And I think I already know your answer, but go ahead.
My general answer is discarding the eyes part for now, 'cause it's a special case. Generally, in context, because I don't see the mechanical sort of issue with allowing it, I would generally allow light both in 5e and Pathfinder to target a living creature. So long as, as per what I just said, it's not to the detriment of the creature, as essentially an untyped harmless effect.
Okay, right. So then that's the part B to that question is, what effect would that have? And you just answered, no effect. Um, I think for me, uh, I would stick with the raw and not allow creatures to be targeted, but I will discuss like if I did allow it, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So for
Oh,
now it's a yes for you with no effect. It's a no for me. I would stick with the rules.
I would state there is kind of a corner case to be talked about there.
Yeah, what's
Because
that?
in 5e, the mechanics of the spell are slightly different than in Pathfinder, where in Pathfinder, the point touched glows, whereas the wording in 5e more or less says that the object itself glows evenly across its surface. So, under the realms of this, you can touch a creature. In 5e, it's pretty much always harmless. In Pathfinder, because it would be absurdly difficult, I could conceivably see you being able to blind someone if your GM let you target a creature. If you made your touch attack at like the minus 15 penalty required to touch someone on the eyes. It's like minus 15 or minus 10 for that tricky of a called shot. It's another one of those weird edge cases, but I'd let that stunt go through.
Yeah, so that's pretty much where I would be at with that is if I were to allow it, it would only ever be with the case of you have to target the eyes. It's going to be incredibly difficult to ever touch the eyes, and I would probably give them a saving throw as well. Um, just because I don't like spells that don't have some kind of save unless they're not you know save or die or like that's the wrong wording
Save
like
or suck.
yeah, yeah. But the saving throw is the important part. If you get a saving throw, I'm okay with there being blinding effects and things like that that just completely take a person out. But to have something that doesn't even allow for a saving throw, yes, it's an insanely hard attack roll, but I think that there just needs to be something more because it is literally a save or suck scenario for them, even with the saving throw. So,
Hmm.
I think that there needs to be, something to balance that out if you're going to add, because let's be real about it. It's something that you're adding into the game. So if you're going to make light more powerful by giving it that ability, you have to balance that somehow.
That gets down to some general design theory malarkey, because I mean I can't specify to like 5e because I haven't sat down and clinically analyzed every single spell in its roster. But in Pathfinder, there's a general idea of when it comes to a spell, except for like the most horrendous spells like Disintegrate, generally it's a saving throw or a touch attack. Uh, Spells that have both are things like Disintegrate, which are like practically instant kills. Like not just save or suck,
Ah.
but immediate murder.
Okay, yeah. So, it's been a little bit since I really sat down and went through something like that to refresh my memory on how that works. So it is possible that a attack like that would be enough to balance it, but I would just, urge caution when adding that much power to a simple cantrip that most people already are going to need to take just for exploration purposes anyway.
Yeah. Well, there are all kinds of different things. The massive penalty to making the called shot work is part of the real thing there, because mostly this is gonna have by your wizards, your clerics, maybe some in betweeners like a magus or something. And in Pathfinder, those guys don't get full bad progression. And for the point already discussed, that isn't even a 5e ruling I would make, because the whole point glows that touch things only applies in Pathfinder.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and that brings up, just the whole point of what is your wizard or whatever doing close enough to someone to be casting Cantrip on them anyway.
Desperation play in a bad moment.
Yeah,
There's always the possibility.
yeah.
Um, and, I guess there is. No, wait, that's close by that. It doesn't matter. So I feel like that one's been worked to death. There's the other side where light emanating from your eyes is pretty cool. How about talk about that one?
Yeah, well, exactly. That's the final thing we were going to discuss here is, would you ever rule it as a beneficial thing? We've talked about doing it to a hostile enemy, and of course, that would be, going with the character would be blinded route. Now, discussing, would you ever allow it on an ally? Would it ever be beneficial? Um, I think that it's only beneficial in the sense of like, okay, so you have a lantern that you don't have to hold. Um,
Yeah.
but
But of course, you could do that with light anyway by just like making your sword glow or something.
exactly, exactly. So I don't know that it necessarily would have to, be something that you cast on the eyes because I would never give it the power of like another spell like casting light gives the person dark vision or anything like that. So it would only ever do what it was intended to do, which is glow. And so, I feel like, for the beneficial purposes, there's just nothing that you could get out of it that you couldn't just as easily get out of casting it on your shield or your sword or anything else other than the fact that you can just close your eyes to shut off the light, but then you can't see. So I mean, you can't see two different ways. So I don't know. It just seems to me that I'd rather have it cast on a dagger that I could quickly sheath or something like that if I was worried about hiding the light. So I just don't ever see it as being a beneficial thing. I think I could see doing it as a blinding effect for the enemies just because I like the cinematic of like grabbing them and holding your hand over their eyes and chanting and their eyes start to glow and they're blinded. I like the cinematic of that, but I'd have to balance it with like some pretty insane attack rolls.
Yeah. For me, for 5e, it's basically a non-effect. It like if a player wants to do it and they specified it before like the game started or they developed it as like a flourish, I'd allow them to cast light on their own eyes as just like a technique, I guess. A nameless thing because it doesn't do anything. I've seen it like third party like cantrips for the things where it's like you can cause light to emanate from your eyes, and this allows you to project a cone of light.
Right.
The problem with that is Pathfinder and 5.E, but if yeah, whatever. Is that they're not direction based games. It's not like GURPS or something where the direction your character is facing is something that there are rules for and is tracked. So having it be a cone emanation from your eyes intrinsically requires your character to be looking in a certain direction, which really isn't how the games work. Um,
Yeah, well, I mean, on a VTT, sometimes they do have directional lighting as an option. So there is that.
Yeah. In Pathfinder, though, which is more my wheelhouse, there is a specific thing I could see being allowed for. Whereas a trait level bonus, you could take like Eyes of an Angel or something, where you may treat your eyes as an acceptable target for the light spell, and so long as you have a light spell cast on your eyes, you like gain your choice of either +1 to intimidate or diplomacy as a +1 trait bonus. That's roughly a trait level ability in Pathfinder.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a pretty cool use. And of course, since you mention it, if we're talking about a PC, a player that wants to do this, of course, a DM should find a way to work with them because, who cares if they want to cast it on their eyes? Like they're going to cast it on something. It's going to be used. So, if they want to cast it from their eyes and be cool, that's what the rule of cool is all about.
Yeah.
I was specifically talking about using it as a weapon against your enemies. That becomes like a much more powerful use of it. But if you're
Yeah.
talking about just, like I want to have my light cantrip emanate from my eyes, I mean, it's no different from if you had a nose ring and you wanted it to emanate from that. Yeah, whatever,
Yes.
So yeah, I think in that case for sure there should be no problem with bending the rules as written to allow for something like that. But just the argument of blinding brings up that they want to use it as a weapon. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I think we've pretty well covered this topic. I really want to thank you for joining us today, Bad Data, and I want to thank anyone who's watching. And as always, everyone, good gaming.